Britain was definitely an enemy, and Hitler
True.
was doing them no favors.
Oh, wait, what?
Well,
Hi, and welcome to History Legends. Today, we'll do a step-by-step breakdown of why Germany couldn't win World War II by potential history. Make sure to watch part 1 if you haven't. And as always, before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, if you're interested in World War II and how it actually happened from first-hand accounts, I highly recommend you my book, The Great Veterans Project. What makes it unique is that I cover almost every nation that participated in the war. That way you can get as many perspectives of this massive conflict. Link is in the bio. Or if you want some cool merch, it's all in the description. Without further ado, let's go!
Here are a few more ways Germany could not have won World War II. One thing I've seen brought up a few times is that if Hitler had not let the British Expeditionary Force get away at Dunkirk, that later the troops could not be used during Operation Overlord, and thus no Western Front.
It doesn't even make sense! Oh my god, 10 seconds in, doesn't make sense. Kate, I know it's not him that said it, but people in the comments, but just the thought of it doesn't make sense. What most people don't know is that about half of all the British troops, 45% to be exact, were evacuated after Dunkirk. As you know, about 200,000 British and 140,000 French troops were evacuated during Operation Dynamo. But the British launched 2 other evacuations that managed to return 170,000 additional troops to Britain, namely Operation Cycle and Ariel. But the real unspoken tragedy of the Dunkirk evacuation was that the 140,000 French troops were re-embarked and shipped back to France just in time to be recaptured. Of course, they had no idea that this would happen, but in the end it was a huge waste of time and resources. Churchill had way too much faith in the French government for them to continue the war at all costs. I understand that this is pure alternate history, but imagine if the Allies had an additional 140,000 men available in 1940.
Furthermore, he realized that Britain was against his intentions in the East and would become a barrier there. All this being said, by the time of the invasion of France, Britain was definitely an enemy, and Hitler was doing them no favors.
Oh, wait, what? Well, what do you mean, no favors? Just look up the May 1940 War Cabinet Crisis. The ultimate goal of Hitler's blitzkrieg was to win a decisive military victory and force the French and British governments to sue for peace. Basically transforming them into satellite states allied to Germany so that he can then focus on the Eastern Front. But you have to know and remember the meeting that took place on May 27th. There was Churchill, Lord Halifax, Neville Chamberlain, and other members of the War Cabinet. There was just one topic to discuss. Should they sue for peace? Lord Halifax saw a clear role for Italy to act as mediator between the UK and Germany in a peace deal with Hitler, and the Italians had indicated they were agreeable at a price. As you can see, Lord Halifax was pro-appeasement with Germany, just like most British politicians at the time. I wasn't there in person, but I can tell you what Lord Beaverbrook noticed. He said everyone wanted him, Lord Halifax, as Prime Minister. Chamberlain wanted Halifax, Labour Party wanted Halifax, the Lords wanted Halifax, even the King wanted Halifax. Churchill and Halifax each fought and debated to get their respective points of view across the War Cabinet. And by May 28th, it seemed that Lord Halifax would get the upper hand, and that Churchill would be forced out of office. But Churchill managed to outmaneuver him and convince the War Cabinet to keep on fighting no matter what. This is the most important day in World War II. The War Cabinet was convinced to keep on fighting, the British Parliament was then also convinced to keep on fighting, and the success of the Dunkirk evacuation really consolidated Churchill's power. So in the end, it's all because of one man, Churchill.
It's an operational failing, not a peaceful gesture. On May 15, 1940, the Germans broke through the French 2nd and 9th armies and steamed ahead night and day, thanks in part to some tablet boys, towards the coast. Although these gains were good for the Germans, the mechanized forces were quickly running out of supplies and were leaving their flanks exposed, which opened them to being cut off, the result of which could cause ruin for the German plans. It is at this point a nervous Hitler, being counseled by Generals von Kluge and von Rundstedt, gave a halt order to secure the flanks and allow the exhausted panzer divisions to refit. Check out this video by Mark Gurges for more.
The panzer divisions left a trail of broken down tanks behind them, and the ones that reached the Channel coastline urgently needed maintenance. And the German infantry and all its horses were still far behind and had not caught up yet to the tanks. That's the main narrative, and it's true, but there's also more to it. Just like Potential History said, the Halt Order itself was not issued directly by Hitler, but came through generals von Kluge and von Rundstedt. We can believe there was debate within the German High Command, with both generals fearing an Allied counterattack. Just like what happened at the Battle of the Marne in 1914, which really traumatized German generals. However, another general from Brauchitsch, the army's chief of staff, had disagreed with the Halt Order and favored an immediate attack. If the Haltebefehl, the Halt Order, was so important for the tanks, why would the army chief of staff want to continue the attack? I don't know, I'm just questioning, but if the panzers really needed to stop to refit, why would the army's chief of staff want to continue the attack? He's the one that knows the general situation the best, no? Von Brauchitsch was part of the old school and less extreme wing of the German military that did not like Hitler's plans for a total war. Just for you to get an idea who this man is, when Hitler wanted to attack France in November 1939, von Brauchitsch and General Halder even discussed overthrowing Hitler. And from what I read, a lot of German generals were not eager to start another world war. German historian Karl-Heinz Friedzer believes that Hitler used the occasion of the Haltebefehl to make it clear to the entire army that he was indeed the supreme commander. And this is the biggest concern of any dictator.
Flyboy Goering promised the Luftwaffe could destroy the British at Dunkirk, and although he failed, I would hardly call the actions of the Luftwaffe just letting the British go. With thousands being killed, over 200 ships being sunk, over 100 planes shot down, and the loss of all the BEF's equipment, Hitler even realized that the halt was an error and resumed the attack while the evacuation was underway.
You see, the Halt Order started on May 24th and lasted until the beginning of May 26th, when the Germans resumed their attack. And right after, magically, the British talk about peace. And it's also very surprising that while the British were having peace talks amongst each other, the French did the same thing. Is it a coincidence?
It was only successful due to the brave French soldiers that held out until it was complete. But even if he had let them go, there are still more problems asserting that this means a German victory in the war. Britain had to rearm all the soldiers evacuated, which is a huge loss and took some time. This force, when returned to England, was not in any way ready to turn around and invade France, although the troop reserves were good to have if Germany decided to invade. But they were not in fighting condition for a long time.
Oh! Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but Potential History claims that the troops from the BEF were not active from 1940 until 1944 for Operation Overlord. That's true, but only for some units. In 1940, the objective now was to halt Axis progression. For this reason, the experienced troops of the British Expeditionary Force were refitted and the first to be sent to the front around the world, while some units of the BEF stayed in Britain for home defense. Once the Battle of Britain was over, many of them were disbanded to form new units and sent directly all around the world. For example, the 1st Armored Brigade was sent to Egypt in November 1940 and fought right after in Greece. The 4th and 5th Infantry Brigades were sent to Burma in 1942. The entire 50th Northumbrian Infantry Division was sent to the Middle East in June 1941. The 5th Infantry Division was sent to Madagascar in April 1942. And there are many others I could name. And many of the men from Dunkirk, if they did not go fight abroad, stayed in Britain to train the new recruits.
Importantly, Britain is not the only nation present at D-Day. A combined landing force of American, British, and Canadian forces, along with smaller groups from other countries, landed and fought on the Western Front. Although the troop loss, if Dunkirk had failed, may have limited Britain's number of troops, the United States, having only mobilized about 9% of its population in the course of the war, could have very realistically filled in the gaps as it did in reality with the British equipment losses.
But Potential History is right, and that's undeniable about the Americans. However, the United States only joined the war in December 1941. and were only fully starting military operations in late 1942. So who fought the Axis in the meantime? Yes, we know there's already someone in the comments typing the Soviets, and it's true. But the point I'm trying to make is that the bulk of Commonwealth forces were already manned by non-British personnel despite the success of the Dunkirk evacuation. Whether they were Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans, without forgetting the thousands of East and West Africans who fought in Madagascar, East Africa, and Burma, and especially the massive 2.5 million men of the British Indian Army that secured a win in East and North Africa and in Burma. Had the Dunkirk evacuation failed, we can believe that these men would have been replaced by other Commonwealth forces.
But all of this still doesn't take into account where the real war is being fought, in the East.
And that's for another video. Now to answer the question, would destroying the BEF at Dunkirk have changed anything in the course of World War II? Obviously, this is pure speculation, but from a military perspective, not really. We saw how Britain could have replenished the empty spots with troops from its empire. And on top of that, the ground forces of the BEF were not essential in the defense of the home islands the same way the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force were. However, politically, maybe. The political impact of major military defeats are always hard to forecast. With 200,000 British soldiers in German custody, the upper hand might have shifted back towards Lord Halifax and the pro-appeasement faction in order to get the troops back home. But again, we can't forget how in 1914 the BEF had suffered so many casualties that it had to be built back from the ground up. Anyway, that's all I have for my analysis. Hope you learned a thing or two. In that case, don't forget to like and subscribe. Like I said before, I might cover potentials, history, other points about the Eastern Front. Would you be interested in that? Comment below.